Anything that we take into our bodies, so whether it's food, whether it's some sort of drug, has an impact on, the balances that we have in our bodies, the way the chemicals and things react. So food, because it's what we use to survive, and we have to have food to be able to function in everyday life. There's different foods and different makeups of foods that can make us feel sluggish, that can make us alert. Who doesn't need their cup of coffee in the morning to get going? But aside from those normal everyday things, food can actually have a really big role in the development of things like cardiovascular disease. Obviously food plays a big role in diabetes, but then also our own psychological well-being. So food's implicated, and food components like additives implicated in things like ADHD. Different food consumption patterns have an impact on things like depression and anxiety. So because it is such a big part of our lives, it obviously has a big role to play in health general, and also our psychological and our general feeling of well-being. I guess there's a whole range of things. Obviously, like I said, there's cardiovascular disease and diabetes. Cancer's been linked to consumption of different foods and food additives, and they're probably the big ones. But even, symptoms of different things, and, chronic but, not as drastic conditions, I guess. Things like eczema, headaches, migraines, irritable bowel syndrome, and, stomach problems, blood noses. A whole range of different sort of lower key symptoms that people can have, on a fairly long-term basis, that can be impacted by food. With children, it's not so much the food itself, but what's actually made up in the food that they're eating. So there's been a lot of studies recently that have implicated food additives and the effect that they have on children's behaviour. There's been a lot of research over the long term that's looked at ADHD in particular and children, but there's studies more recently, particularly the Southampton study in 2007, and studies that have come out within Australia and overseas since then, that have actually implicated additives as having detrimental effects on attention and behaviour in your standard run-of-the-mill children. So, normal children that you could go into any schoolyard and find that don't have any issues, according to their parents and teachers, with attention or behaviour, but they can the behaviour and attention can actually decrease and get worse when they're consuming these additives, and that's been found through controlled trials. We also had a study out of Western Australia that looked at food consumption in teenagers, and the teenagers who were consuming a Western dietary pattern, which we would define as something that's high levels of fats, high levels of salt, high levels of sugar, eating a lot of junk food, not necessarily eating a whole lot of, fruit and veg on a day-to-day basis. And those teenagers, 14 and 15-year-olds, were actually showing more behaviour problems, more symptoms of things that could end up being depression or anxiety in the long term than the students who were consuming, more vegetables and more fruit on a day-to-day basis. The key additives are your artificial colourings, preservatives, flavour enhancers, and artificial flavours to a certain degree. The artificial colourings, and there's 6 in particular that were implicated in the Southampton study, are the ones that are, considered the most problematic in terms of attention and behaviour. But some preservatives have been linked to asthma. Flavour enhancers have been linked to development of hives and itchy rashes and migraines. And artificial flavours, because we don't actually know what goes into the artificial flavourings, it's hard to actually isolate what's in them that might actually be causing problems. But again, they're linked to behavioural problems, to skin problems, to migraines, to problems with your stomach. So again, it's not hard to actually work out the symptoms and connect them to a particular additive, a particular food. But those classes, your colourings, preservatives and flavour enhancers, are the big ones in terms of watching out for them. The same thing can occur with natural food chemicals. And so in every food we consume, there's a range of different chemicals that occur naturally. So we're not talking about anything that's been, added onto the outside like a pesticide. But if someone's sensitive to any of those natural chemicals in foods, then it can have similar effects as those artificial additives can. So for example, there's a class of chemical called salicylates, which are found naturally in things like apples in fairly high concentrations, in tomatoes, in some grapes. There's another class of natural chemicals called glutamates, which again are naturally found in tomatoes, grapes, broccoli, things like that. So if an individual is sensitive to those individual chemicals that make up those foods, then we need to be looking out for those things as well.